I've interviewed some of you in the audience. I speak a lot every week on Marketplace Africa to people about these very issues. And again and again and again, I hear both governments sometimes, but mostly private sector saying the one thing that is holding back Africa's growth is government regulations. When do you think a country like Ethiopia, for example, would liberalize the banking sector, the mobile sector?
Before I go to your question, I want to respond to some of the points that have been raised. Now, the World Bank says that there is over $90 billion. There's a gap of over $90 billion in investment in infrastructure. There has been very little infrastructure investment in most of Africa for the past 30 years. There was infrastructure investment in the initial period of colonization. And it's very interesting that you are refurbishing the railway system that was built by the Brits before the Prime Minister was born. And then in the initial years of independence. Since 1980s, the gap in infrastructure investment has gone in the wrong direction. Why? Because since the 1980s, the policy has been the private sector does the infrastructure. Now, why do we need infrastructure? What's the point? We need infrastructure primarily because that's an essential input for manufacturing, for exploiting our natural resources, for agriculture, and so on and so forth. Now, in manufacturing, public sector doesn't have much of a say. In agriculture, the public sector does not have much of a say. In mining, same thing. So enabling the private sector through public investment in infrastructure is not something that Africa is going to discover. If it tries to, it will simply be reinventing the wheel. That's what happened everywhere else. Second point I want to make. When I say much of infrastructure investment in Africa, not all, but much, will have to be public, that doesn't exclude, for example, in the case of a railway, implementation of the project will probably be done by some multinational company. The wagons and locomotives will naturally be manufactured by somebody else, another private sector. The management of the railway system itself might be done by a private company. But the ownership and the risk capital of that railway system, if it comes from the private sector, it will have a number of risks. First, all of you are saying the public sector has to de-risk. In other words, you are saying the public sector shoulders the risks and the private sector reaps the benefits. That's not going to work. Second, your discount rate is understandably high. You want to have a profit rate of what? 20%? The average profit rate in Africa that people expect is about 30%. With a discount rate of 30%. Imagine how much infrastructure we will be able to do and how much of the gap we are going to fill. So the idea should not be that the public sector should be out, private sector should be in. We have to do, each one of us have to do what our comparative advantage seems to suggest. Now, the public sector does not have money. And that is limiting investment in infrastructure. But you know, these whiz kids in the financial system, I'm sure they can create instruments. The Prime Minister created one instrument. It's called the IFF. The idea was that he would commit to pay a certain amount of money for, say, 30 years for development aid. And the banks would use that as collateral and give us the money now. Simple idea. Financial engineering. Same type of financial engineering can be made. GM has a big multinational financial institution. This talk about deleveraging and all the rest, there's trillions of dollars of money that does not know what to do. And because it does not know what to do, it's going from one commodity to another commodity and becoming a wrecking ball. Today it's oil, tomorrow it's wheat, the day after tomorrow it's some other paper. We want this capital here to do something tangible. And there's a risk here. And the risk, Don's institution is AAA rated. Mine is junk. So if Don could raise the money and lend it to me, then I'll have the money to invest. And the private sector can come in implementation, can come in manufacturing, and so on and so forth. Now, two issues you raised, telecommunications and finance. We have not liberalized the financial sector in the sense that we have not allowed foreign banks to operate in Ethiopia. Why? Because these giants, Chiam, manage an economy that's many times bigger than mine. These giants can wreck a giant economy such as that of the United Kingdom. Ours is a flimsy boat. They come in, they use instruments that we cannot control, that in most instances we don't even understand. The best of us don't even understand. How are we going to regulate? How are we going to regulate these people? It's not possible. We don't have the capacity now. So what did we do? We allow the private sector in Ethiopia, which is not that, not infinitely more complex than the public sector, and therefore could easily be monitored and regulated by the public sector. We allow the private banks to operate here. So we have more than 10 private banks here, but not foreign banks. Is this going to be the permanent feature? No. As we grow, as we develop, and as we become more sophisticated in our regulatory capacity, of course we'll liberalize, but not now. And we have lost nothing because of this policy. Telecommunications. Ethiopia as a country, I think in per capita terms, is investing more in infrastructure than perhaps any other country in Africa, whether it's railways or power or telecommunication. We're doing it by borrowing from banks that are not that good at speculation, mostly Chinese banks. So we have the money, borrowing it, and we want telecommunication in every school, in every village, and we want it cheap, not at 30% discount rate, at 2%, 3% discount rate. That is why we have not yet opened up the telecommunication sector public to private investment. Is that going to be the permanent future? No. Once the market failure there is overcome, we move out. There were times when we owned breweries in this country. Now we are privatizing all of our breweries because that's not our business. The private sector can do it excellent and can do an excellent job. We used to own, and we still own some textiles. The only textile factories we own are the ones that we could not privatize because they're not making profit. But we want to privatize this. So it's not, our policy is not designed to keep the private sector at bay. We know that's a dead end. Without the private sector, there is no development. What our policy is based on is make sure that the public sector plays its role so that we will have Asia-type growth. What do I mean by Asia-type growth? Fast, but not just fast, equitable. Both fast and equitable growth. You cannot have fast and equitable growth without a clear division of labor and partnership between the private sector and the public sector.
I feel like I'm a school teacher.
መሬቱ ከእግሬ ስር ሰማዩ ከላይ ነው። መሬቱ ከእግሬ ስር ሰማዩ ከላይ ነው። ይዣለው አየሩን በሳምባዬ ውስጥ በሳምባዬ ውስጥ በሳምባዬ ውስጥ በልባችን ያለው አንድ ነው ደማችን በልባችን ያለው አንድ ነው ደማችን አንድ ቤት አንድ ቤት በልባችን ያለው አንድ ነው ደማችን በልባችን ያለው አንድ ነው ደማችን አንድ ቤት አንድ ቤት አንድ ቤት
Welcome back to Inside Africa in Tigray, northern Ethiopia. It's amazing how close together so many historical religious sites are here. It almost has a feel of Jerusalem here in Africa. About 10 kilometers from the ancient church of Ukro is the tiny village of Negash, which means king in the Tigrinya language. This is the home of Ethiopia's first Muslim community. And this is the holiest place here for Muslims. They believe this is where the original followers of Muhammad are buried. Here I meet Sheikh Adam Muhammad, who tells me in the 7th century AD, the Prophet Muhammad sent some of his followers to the kingdom now known as Ethiopia.
Muhammad received the spirit in Mecca, but the first people who accepted Islam were in Ethiopia. Muhammad sent 11 men and 5 women followers to Ethiopia because it had a fair king. Even after the non-believers asked the king to return the migrants to the Arab country, the king refused.
It's also believed that a relative of Muhammad lived here.
Yes, Muhammad's daughter was here, but she returned back to her country. This place is the burial site for the 5 women and the 10 men who first migrated to Ethiopia.
Sheikh Muhammad shows me the inside of the mosque. This is a sacred site many Ethiopian Muslims consider second to Mecca. The translator tells me it's being renovated in cooperation with the government so it can be considered for a UNESCO World Heritage Site, an effort that would help secure its significance to the outside world as well. About a 2-hour drive on winding mountain roads takes us to another significant site in the Tigray region. On the way, we stop to recognize a relatively recent historical event. These are the Adwa Mountains. Here, there are no stones or monuments, nothing to tell the story of what happened here. But it was in these mountains, in the mid-1890s, that Ethiopia defeated the invading Italian army, becoming a hero to the colonized nations across Africa. The Adwa Mountains surround the small ancient town of Yeha, home to a temple that is what some say is the oldest standing building in sub-Saharan Africa. Hi, I'm Sonny.
Hello, I'm Kudus.
Kudus, nice to
Nice
meet
to meet
you.
you. Welcome to this side.
Thank you so much. Show me the temple.
Yeah, okay, let me show you.
This dates back to the Damat civilization. So this is for the god of Al-Makkah.
Yeah, this is for the god of moon, which is termed as Al-Makkah,
Al-Makkah.
to mean the boss god. There were many gods to be followed by them, but the dominant one was moon god. That is why they call it Al-Makkah.
I see. Why does it still stand? It's incredible that all these years it's been preserved this way.
The stone is limestone, which is so compact and so soft. So this is one reason it enabled to have such kind of years of existence.
Inside the temple, Kudus takes me to the place where the altar once stood.
Among the many sections, this was the most important section, where we can see openings from there to here. It was partitioned, and this is supposed to be the holy part.
Next to the altar is where animals were sacrificed to Al-Moka.
So this is where the blood was offered. And in the Christianity period, this became baptizing site.
Kudus tells me that Abune Afse, one of the 9 saints from Syria who helped spread Christianity in Ethiopia, came here during the 6th century AD. When he found this old abandoned temple, he began using it as a church, continuing the tradition of spirituality in this holy place. Not far from the temple, Kudus takes me to the special building where the artifacts found in the temple and the nearby church are kept. These are the treasures.
Yeah, this is the treasure house where we can have archaeological findings and ritual objects. The owner of the civilization in Iha were writing on a stone using the Sabian language.
Do you know what they say?
I will try it, but you know that is a dead language, Sabian language, almost to be dead, but I can try my best.
Okay, try. What
And the
is...
system of reading is from right to left, and from left to right, it keeps going zigzag. Or it does have a name called Bostropheden. It is Greek name to mean ox-ploughing system of reading. So generally, dedicated for the son of the crowned king.
These stone carvings are not the only priceless artifacts held here.
Starting from 6th century AD, since then there are different manuscripts written by hand in Giz language. And the material is goat skin. And here are wooden crosses, an iron cross from 6th century AD. These were donated by King Abramaskal, who was the king of Aksum in 6th century AD. He offered it to the church.
A humble display for such a rich collection of history. So we've now come a short distance from the temple. Kudus, what is this?
This is the great palace of the Damat Empire. The Damat Empire was the dynasty of Yaha, which is dated back before 8th century BC. And this is supposed to be the political and economical center of the Damat Empire.
The Damat Empire rules this area from the 10th to the 5th century BC. It is believed to be the first structured empire of sub-Saharan Africa. So how many kings would have enjoyed this palace, for example?
It is said that there were 56 kings had been administrating under the system of the Damat dynasty. Among of them, one to be mentioned is Ethiopis. Ethiopis is a king who was supposed to be the last king of Yeha, the one who named Ethiopia to be named after him. The name Ethiopia has got in the time of Yeha.
It's no wonder Kudus considers Yeha to be the birthplace of Ethiopian civilization. After the Damat civilization declined, Yeha was abandoned as the seat of power in Ethiopia, and the nearby kingdom of Aksum began to rise. That's where we're headed next on Inside Africa.
معروف أن الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام نزل الأمر في مكة بعد 40 سنة. نزل الوحي، القوي كان يستفيد والضعيف كان يهتزم. بعد 560 سنة الرسول في مكة عليه الصلاة والسلام نزل هو الأمر الوحي أن الإسلام القوي كان يستفيد والضعيف كان يهتزم، والنساء كانوا بحياتهم يدفنهم. قال اذهبوا إلى أرض الحبشة فيها ملك العادل ملك الصالح. لما استقبله السيد عثمان بن عفان رقية بنت رسول الله أول المهاجرين، كان في الأرض الحبشة كانت ملكته في الأقصم. المهاجرين آتوا عنده 11 رجلا أو 4 أو 5 نسوة، آتوا بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أتجوزها السيد عثمان بن عفان. هجروا إلى نجاش. النجاش الملوك كان يسموهم يعني الرؤساء، كان النجا اسمه أدرآز ابن أبحور ابن أبجر. الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام قال إلى أصحمة النجاش، أين نذهب يا رسول الله؟ فيها أرض الصدق، فيها ملك العادل ملك الصالح لا يضر
Their stiff necks will hang them.
Do you not bow yourselves before your prophet?
Muhammad is a man. We kneel only to God.
Where are Muhammad's miracles, Jafar? If he were a prophet, he'd light the sky with miracles.
Indeed, this is true. God has given his prophets a sign of miracles, that we may recognize them.
The miracle of Muhammad is the Holy Quran.
A book written by an illiterate, attributed to God. I think the emperor has had enough.
I'm mindful of Pentecost, when God sent down tongues of fire upon the heads of Christ's apostles, so they could speak the many languages of the world that they knew not before. But do such miracles happen in our times? I've heard enough. You've made a poor case.
When we suffered persecution in Mecca, Muhammad told us, go to Abyssinia, the land of a righteous king, where no man is wronged.
What they call persecution was fair punishment. Their disorder and their...
Why did your prophet send you to me?
Because you believe in the book of the one God as we do. He sent us because in your heart God will protect us.
Talking with them is like drawing water from a mirage.
But they've now laid a duty on me to listen to them, my friend. Go on.
For years, we worshipped wood and stone, images of our own manufacture. We lived in ignorance of God. We had few earthly laws and no heavenly laws. The rich neglect the poor, and the natural pity of man, whereby he lifts his brother up when he has fallen, is described by them as upsetting social order. To this inhumanity has come a man whom God chose, and in that we believe.
You're overcome. I beg you to collect yourself.
I speak of the messenger of God. Muhammad teaches us to worship one God, to speak truth, to love our neighbors as ourselves, to give charity. Even a smile can be charity. To protect women from misuse, to shelter orphans, and to turn away from gods of wood and stone.
I cannot keep still and hear this blasphemy. We are an ancient civilization. To call our gods wood and stone is to speak ignorantly of them. The idol, the form, is not what we worship, but the spirit that resides within the form.
I agree that idolatry is not always fully understood.
Thank you. Now let me bring him back to the women.
God made woman to be the proper companion of man. She is different, but equal.
Equal! We buy them, feed them, clothe them, use them, discard them. Women equal to us?
God created man from one male and one female. You must respect in all women the womb that bore you.
Why are your 300 gods so tongue-tied, while his only God is eloquent?
God has spoken to us before, through Abraham, Noah, Moses, and through Jesus Christ. Why should we be so surprised that God speaks to us now through Muhammad?
Who taught you those names?
They are named in the Quran.
I knew Muhammad when he was an orphan minding sheep.
And we knew Christ as a carpenter. What Christ says, and what your Muhammad says, is like two rays from the